The halo effect. The halo effect is a mental shortcut where we let one good quality in a person blind us to everything else. Back in 1920, psychologist Edward Thorndike noticed this when he asked military officers to rate their soldiers. He found that if an officer thought a soldier looked physically fit, they automatically assumed that soldier was also smart, loyal, and brave. That single positive trait acts like a glowing halo, spilling over to cover their entire personality. In everyday life, this means we often look at someone attractive or successful and falsely assume they are also kind, honest, and reliable. This still matters today because it constantly trips us up in job interviews and elections, causing us to trust people for the wrong reasons. Charisma blindness. It is a psychological blind spot where we confuse superficial charm with genuine character. Back in 1920, psychologist Edward Thorndike documented this as the halo effect. When someone speaks smoothly and smiles warmly, our brains naturally assume they are also honest. Manipulators use this loophole. They crank up their charisma to short-circuit your natural defenses. They shower you with compliments and make intense eye contact to build rapid trust. As a result, you completely ignore obvious red flags. You might hand over your savings or your heart to someone who is actively exploiting you. This still matters today because modern con artists and toxic leaders rely on this exact trick to hide their true intentions. Confirmation bias. This is the mental glitch that makes you ignore giant red flags because you really want someone to be a good person. Back in 1960, psychologist Peter Wason proved that human brains are wired to hunt for evidence that proves what we already believe. When you meet someone and decide they are great, your mind goes to work protecting that idea. You subconsciously filter out their toxic jokes, missed calls, or rude behavior. The result is a warped view of reality where you only see their best traits. You end up holding onto an imaginary version of who they are. This still matters because recognizing this mental filter helps you see people for who they truly are. Love bombing. Love bombing is a manipulation tactic where someone overwhelms you with extreme affection and attention. Cults like the Unification Church actually coined the term in the 1970s to describe how they hooked new recruits. The process is intense. A person texts you constantly, buys you expensive gifts, and tells you that you are their soulmate within days of meeting. They manufacture a whirlwind romance to bypass your normal boundaries. The result is a false, rapid sense of deep trust. You feel incredibly special and lower your guard completely, becoming blind to any early warning signs. This still matters because it is a very common trap in modern dating, used to lock you in before the real emotional abuse begins. Authority bias. This is our natural habit of blindly trusting people who have titles, wealth, or power. From a young age, society trains you to listen to teachers, doctors, and police officers. When you see a uniform, an impressive resume, or a fancy suit, your brain takes a shortcut. You stop asking questions and suspend your normal critical thinking. The psychologist Stanley Milgram proved exactly how far this goes back in 1961. He found that 65% of everyday people were willing to deliver severe electric shocks to a stranger simply because a stern man in a white lab coat told them to do it. This still matters today because modern marketers and scammers constantly use fake experts to bypass your skepticism. Projecting goodness. This is a psychological blind spot where we assume everyone else has the same moral compass we do. In 1977, psychologist Lee Ross called this the false consensus effect. When you are naturally honest and empathetic, your brain defaults to expecting that same behavior from others. You walk into interactions looking through a lens of trust. Because of this, you end up projecting your own good intentions onto people who are actually highly deceptive. You might make excuses for someone's constant lying simply because you cannot imagine doing it yourself. Understanding this mental habit is the only way to stop giving toxic people the benefit of the doubt and finally see them for who they really are. Familiarity principle. This is the psychological quirk where you start trusting someone just because you see them all the time. Back in 1968, psychologist Robert Zions proved this by showing people random symbols and nonsense words. The more often people saw a specific shape, the more they rated it as pleasant. The exact same thing happens with human interaction. When a stranger shows up at your coffee shop every morning, your brain slowly stops seeing them as a potential threat. Frequent contact artificially lowers your psychological guard over time. You might suddenly feel comfortable sharing personal details with a coworker you barely know, just because they sit nearby. This still matters today because marketers, politicians, and scammers use constant repetition to easily win your trust. Social proof. Social proof is a mental shortcut where we copy the beliefs of others to decide who we can trust. Psychologist Robert Cialdini coined the term in his 1984 book on influence, pointing out that when we feel unsure, we simply look around at the crowd. We essentially outsource our personal character judgment to our friends or society. If everyone else seems to endorse a charismatic leader or a slick new friend, we figure they must be safe. You ignore your own internal red flags because you assume the group has already done the heavy lifting of vetting them. This still matters today because it explains how bad actors easily thrive in plain sight, using our natural desire to fit in against us. Mirroring tactics. Mirroring is when a manipulator deliberately copies your behavior to win your trust. Back in 1999, psychologists discovered the chameleon effect, showing that people naturally mimic each other to build rapport. Manipulators just weaponize this human glitch. They study your social media, match your breathing, copy your posture, and suddenly claim to love your favorite obscure bands. If you value loyalty, they talk endlessly about how loyal they are. The visible effect is an intense, artificial rush of intimacy. You look at them and think you have just met your absolute soulmate. This still matters today because that manufactured bond disarms your natural defenses, making you blind to the trap closing around you. Vulnerability, exploitation. This is when someone uses your emotional pain against you. When you go through a breakup, lose a loved one, or move to a new city, you naturally crave connection. Scammers actively hunt for people in these exact transitions. Historically, con artists scoured newspaper obituaries to find grieving widows. Today, they scroll social media looking for posts about grief or isolation. They swoop in, offer the exact comfort you need, and build a rapid, fake bond. The visible result is a shattered sense of trust and often completely drained savings. In 2022 alone, the Federal Trade Commission reported Americans lost $1.3 billion to romance scams. This matters today because anyone can fall into a vulnerable state, making emotional awareness your best defense. Cognitive dissonance. This is the uncomfortable mental clash you feel when reality contradicts your beliefs. Psychologist Leon Festinger coined the term in 1957 to describe how humans struggle with conflicting ideas. When someone you trust does something awful, your brain goes into overdrive. You cannot easily hold the belief that this person is good while watching them do something terrible. So, you perform mental gymnastics. You make excuses for them, downplay their actions, or blame the victim. You twist the facts to protect your original view because admitting you were wrong about them hurts too much. It still matters today because understanding this reflex helps us stop defending bad behavior and finally face the truth. Trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is a psychological response where an abused person develops a deep sense of loyalty to their abuser. The term was coined by therapist Patrick Carnes in 1997 to explain why people stay in dangerous situations. It happens through intermittent reinforcement. First, the toxic person creates intense stress and fear, flooding your brain with cortisol. Then they suddenly apologize and show extreme affection. This sudden shift triggers a massive rush of dopamine. Over time, your brain actually becomes addicted to this hormonal roller coaster. You start confusing high-stress drama with passionate love, making you defend the person hurting you. Understanding this chemical trap still matters today because it helps victims realize they are not weak, but simply fighting a biological addiction. Optimism bias. It is a psychological illusion first outlined by Neil Weinstein in 1980 that makes you think bad things only happen to other people. Around 80% of us are hardwired this way. When you enter a new relationship, your brain assumes betrayal or manipulation is a tragedy meant for someone else. You naturally filter out red flags to protect your sunny outlook. Because of this, you completely drop your guard. You share your deepest secrets, hand over your time, and give away your trust without asking for proof. You simply ignore basic self-protection. This still matters today because your false sense of immunity is exactly what manipulators rely on to walk right through your front door. The rescue fantasy. This is the psychological urge to fix a deeply broken person. Sigmund Freud first outlined this concept in 1910, describing the drive to save someone from destructive habits. You meet a partner who is chaotic or emotionally unavailable. Instead of walking away, you dive right in. You mistakenly believe your unwavering love and trust will somehow cure their toxic behavior. As a result, you build a completely one-sided relationship. You exhaust yourself trying to change someone who never asked to be fixed, while their actions drag you down. This pattern still matters today because it cleverly masks codependency as a heroic act, keeping you stuck in relationships that only break your own heart. Sunk cost fallacy. This is a mental trap where we keep trusting someone just because we have known them for a long time. Back in 1985, behavioral psychologists proved humans absolutely hate losing an investment. You spend months or years pouring emotional energy, time, and forgiveness into a partner or friend. When they repeatedly lie to you, walking away feels like throwing all those years in the garbage. So you convince yourself they will change, and you invest even more effort. You end up stuck in a miserable cycle, excusing bad behavior and doubling down on a toxic relationship simply because you cannot let go of the past. It still matters today because recognizing this mental glitch helps you finally cut your losses and protect your future.